Zelda franchise has greatly changed since the release of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, whether it's the gameplay, art style, or soundtrack. A few months ago, we even had Zelda producer Eiji Onuma's point of view as to why the Zelda franchise probably won't be like it was before. He states, "It's interesting when I hear people say that they prefer the old entries because I am wondering, why do you want to go back to a type of game where you're more limited or more restricted in the types of things or ways you can play?" While I can understand his point of view as to why go back to a way of playing when everything was more restricted back then, newer doesn't mean better. That's why I'm here to give 5 reasons as to why the traditional Zelda formula should come back. Soundtracks have always been a huge part of Zelda games. All their titles have very iconic soundtracks, such as Dragon Roost Island from Wind Waker or even the main menu theme from Ocarina of Time. However, when it comes to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, no soundtracks really comes to mind. I mean, just to say we don't even have any music playing on the title screen. Now I know that this game was purposely made to convey the open world aspect of those two games, but it still doesn't change the fact that the lack of music is present. Yeah, sure, there are some bangers like the Tears of the Kingdom main theme, but even that wasn't in the final game. Well, there are some leitmotifs, but in the final section of the game, when catching Zelda, that music is basically some sort of short remix. Traditional Zelda soundtracks always give more life to the games, so the lack of soundtracks in the newer titles is pretty disappointing. Gameplay is like the main core of Zelda games. That's what makes the games fun. Not that I didn't enjoy the open world style of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, in fact, it's fantastic. I really love the feeling of just being free and being able to do anything in a huge world. But I feel like when the game gives you too much liberty at first, it's hard to get on track on what to do. I know Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom did a great job at guiding the player in the beginning, but afterward, you're pretty much on your own. That's when people get bored and simply don't know what to do next. Believe it or not, I genuinely love Skyward Sword's linear gameplay style. It's fun and entertaining. You constantly have something to do. Newer Zelda titles, however, tend to give up on the player after a while and make you do what you want. I feel like this isn't bad or good, it just depends on the player. I personally like both, but I have to agree that spending 1 hour on the Great Plateau and then telling me to find Zelda had me quite confused at first. Storytelling in traditional Zelda games is awesome. It's the main motivation for completing the game. But I have to agree that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom storytelling had me disappointed, especially Tears of the Kingdom. Like seriously, where is Link in Tears of the Kingdom's cutscenes? We see him in the beginning with Zelda, then we see him lose his arm and stuff, but after that, the whole focus is on Zelda and the founders of Hyrule. At least Breath of the Wild had Link appearing in almost every memories. Talking about memories, Nintendo seemed to try to reincorporate that concept in Tears of the Kingdom, except it's weird. Like you're telling me Link suddenly saw Zelda 10,000 years ago through a single tear? It's a game, so logic shouldn't be expected, but at least Breath of the Wild had quite a realistic explanation for it. Link was recovering his memory, so normally, seeing certain elements would make him remember his past. But it's not only that. For a sequel, Tears of the Kingdom doesn't feel like a sequel. The champions from Breath of the Wild are almost nowhere mentioned when they were a vital part of the game's story. Hopefully, we'll get more unique settings in future Zelda games, like the takeover of Twilight, a moon crashing, or a flooded Hyrule. So this reason kind of ties back to gameplay, but progression seemed to be a bit easier in old school Zelda games. As I mentioned earlier, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom guide the player in the beginning, but after that, it's up to you to discover what that version of Hyrule has to offer. There's just so much content and secrets in Breath of the Wild, and even more in Tears of the Kingdom, so it's hard to keep up with our progression. Sure, it's somewhat organized, so at least that helps. But I know for a fact that completionists like myself spend a lot of time trying to 100% Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. When it comes to games like Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, it took me about 75 hours to 100% each game. Breath of the Wild took me about 280 hours, and Tears of the Kingdom 365 hours. However, about 80 of those hours were spent just trying to get all the Korok Seeds. I feel like many quests in modern Zelda games are pretty useless. Korok Seeds are an example, but Hudson Signs in Tears of the Kingdom and more are just as useless. At least in traditional Zelda games, everything had a purpose and was fun to complete. Whether that's finding hard pieces, trying to obtain every mask in Majora's Mask, or it may be even max upgrading the wallet capacity. Getting rid of some useless quests could not only make the game more light, but also make it seem more worth completing. I feel like this is more subjective, but changing the art style could be great. When you think about it, we have only had 2 big Zelda games released since 2017, them being The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and its sequel, Tears of the Kingdom. We have indeed had ports and remakes such as Link's Awakening on Switch, but they're not new games. We also had spin-offs in a Hyrule Warriors game, but I wouldn't consider them mainline titles as the gameplay is very different. Besides, the story isn't canon. Breath of the Wild, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, and Tears of the Kingdom all use the same art style. I think it's time for a change. Luckily for us, in another interview, Zelda's director Hidemaru Fujibayashi he states, "I think it is, to use a bit of a term, an apotheosis, or the final form of that version of The Legend of Zelda. In that regard, I don't think that we'll be making a direct sequel to our world such as that we've created. In brief, the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom universe are the last ones. Normally, we should be getting something very new and different next for the franchise, but what could it be?" Since Aonuma doesn't want to go back to old school Zelda games and Fujibayashi said that Tears of the Kingdom was the last Zelda entry of its style, what could we be expecting next? Perhaps an open world Zelda game but set in a new version of Hyrule? Or maybe not even set in Hyrule? The future of Zelda is quite uncertain, but at least it's in good hands, so I'm sure we're going to get something very good. I'm curious to know what you guys think. Should we go back to more traditional Zelda games or stay with the modern ones? Please let me know. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.